Cool. Kia ora tātou. My name is Laura O'Connell Rapira and I am the outgoing director of ActionStation, and tonight it is my great pleasure to host the co-founders of ActionStation, Marianne Elliott and Salole. We are hoping to have a lively discussion about the whakapapa of ActionStation. And we're very blessed to have some of the staff members and the co-chair of our board join us this evening as well, who will throw some questions into the mix if there's anything that comes up along the way. So the first question that I wanted to ask, and I can throw it to, I don't know if either of you are ready for this question and want to go first, but I guess, yeah, we had this process at the ActionStation board where we used to go around and talk to one another. We took turns, I remember, at the board meetings to say, why ActionStation? Why have you decided to give your time and your energy and your just everything? I feel like you two particularly have given so much of yourselves to ActionStation to birth this organization into the world. And so why did you do that?
Well, I will kick off just because chronologically that probably works. But so I just finished running the Green Party national campaign in 2011. And I had the great privilege of being under the bonnet with both the party and the ministers, and was around the table, sorry, the MPs, and it was around the table for their kōrero, and I could just, I just, you know, saw these people working in this extraordinary capacity, and I was like, well, something is broken about the system for these people to be operating with integrity and having this fantastic kind of long-standing kaupapa and a manifesto that that also had, you know, was very, very, it was you know, had this extraordinary vision for Aotearoa, and but it just wasn't getting traction, and also the way that they were reported externally was challenging. And I was just sort of going, well, I feel like the system for representation is profoundly broken, and what is the opportunity for creating a more people-powered change vehicle? And I had not heard of Get Up Over the Ditch, but I had maybe heard of Move On, but in a very sort of, it was kind of a campaign specific kind of way. And I knew that there was this kind of, you know, the internet was sort of changing the way people were behaving, and I started out my working career in the internet. I was in an internet design company. I was extremely hopeful. It was one of the first internet design companies in Wellington. And I just had this real hopeful vision for how the internet was going to enable people to participate, you know, sort of wholeheartedly and you know, and together and collaboratively. And I had, that vision, which, you know, for a while was looking pretty hopeful, and then all of a sudden the big sort of, you know, the big corporations came online, and quickly it sort of became this, you know, monster of political, of corporate kind of behavior. And so it was just about kind of using the mechanisms and the processes that had been kind of enabled by a lot of those corporations to pull people together in hot moments when they could agree, because there was so much, you know, the reality is we probably agree more on things when we sort of share progressive values than not. But, you know, belonging to a political party, for example, makes it really hard because we have to agree on everything. And that is a difficult process, and you know, potentially, you know, kind of it slows down the job of getting really important, you know, economic and environmental progress, fairness and justice happening. So that was my initial why, and and then I think, so it was very intellectual to begin with, and then I happened to be lucky enough to make the connections that made it, that showed me that this was happening all over the world, and kind of brought me into the open network, which hadn't really launched yet, but it was a Ben, and a Ben kind of was able to sort of plug in some pretty major gaps that I'd had into, and to help bring that about a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. And so, for context, for those who are watching and maybe haven't heard of the Open Network before, Open is an international sisterhood of organisations that were that had a very similar model of campaigning, but operated independently of one another. And it started off with 5 organisations, didn't it? It was Compact in Germany, Lead Now in Canada, 38 Degrees in the UK, Move On in the US, and Get Up in Australia. And so those were the founding 5 of this network, and it's sort of growing out from there. And we were one of the, when did we join?
We were the first babies to be born of that, yeah.
Who was other?
We were at the first inaugural meeting, I think, in upstate New York. When I say we, I mean me. But yeah, and it wasn't, ActionStation wasn't really a thing at that point. It was very nascent. But yeah, that was part of the ignition process.
And the others that were starting at the same time as us were Uplift in Ireland and Jutka in India. They were probably my Amandla in South Africa, at a similar time, but I had a really close relationship in those early days with the 2 women who had the equivalent role to mine in India and Ireland, which was really amazing because, Ireland has quite a lot in common with Aotearoa New Zealand, and India has like these radically different scale that they were working at. So we would have these amazing conversations where they'd be doing their first campaign and getting, like 1 million sort of people involved or something. But yeah, so that was a pretty special part of the whakapapa of ActionStation for sure, with those international connections, that sisterhood of, and particularly for me and for that ActionStation sort of, what would you call us, like that, that cohort, it was a sisterhood, which was really exciting too, because we were also, those 3 organisations, in fact, the 4, including Amandla, all had women very, significantly involved, and that was different. All of those 5 sort of founding members had all been founded by men, and by young men, and mostly by men who'd come out of the tech sector. And then the next group, of which ActionStation was a part, were all being founded by women, and more by women who'd come out of the activism and social, sort of human rights, environmental campaigning and social sort of activism background. So it was kind of an interesting shift in that network. Yeah.
That's a great observation. I hadn't actually thought of or put that together before. I'll ask a question next about Open and what you think Open and how connections to them have done for ActionStation. But yeah, what's your why with ActionStation, Marianne?
I know. I have this really interesting relationship to history, which we probably all have, which is like you can go back and pick out the facts that add up to a nicely structured story and then assign a meaning to it and say, this is what it was. Which is, we're all very familiar with that at a national history level, but I also feel a bit like doing that with my personal history sometimes. I feel like things were not nearly as they didn't have the sort of clarity of meaning then that they do now. But a couple of the pieces of my history that I think contributed to me being in the place where I was when Megan was looking for somebody to step into the space that she was kind of creating, were probably, my background is very much in advocacy and campaigning, more at the advocacy end than the campaigning end. I'd worked more in that space of sort of, it's your job as a professional advocate to directly try and influence policymakers, decision makers, politicians. So, I'd done that with a whole range of human rights organizations in particular. And although I think advocacy is really important, I just kept seeing all the gaps that, professional, campaigners and advocates working inside NGOs with specific focus on different issues can only achieve so much. And that ultimately, unless people come together around a sort of shared desire for that change, and those people act together, there's a lack of kind of groundedness, you know, in that change and in that movement. And there are certain areas where I still think that direct advocacy is really useful, and it can absolutely sit alongside the kind of change that ActionStation members create. But I don't think it works without that kind of people-led participatory democratic action. And so that was kind of my constantly, in lots of different settings, I was in this role of, you know, I was like the Oxfam climate change campaigner, or the, you know, in Afghanistan, like the human rights advocate, you know, and these roles weren't grounded in sort of genuine sort of movements of people. But they didn't even, you know, in the early days of ActionStation, we didn't have a sort of a grounded movement of people. We were sort of gathering people up as we went. But so they didn't even have really a sort of a mass mobilization element to them. And I could just see how that was a big gap. So that's probably like that part of the history. And then a big part for me, and this is probably a part of the ActionStation story the whole way along, was Megan. Like I just, you know, when a person whose vision inspires you and who shares your values and is, you know, saying, I'm doing this thing and it's going to be like this. Can you, you know, who wants to join me? You say yes to the people who you trust, right? And the people whose vision you believe in. And so a lot of it would have been to do with just with Megan and the fact that she was looking, she was part of it. And then I think the other piece for me of why, as soon as I got involved, why I was willing to commit 100%, because that first year, you know, Laura, you came on board quite early and Megan was around for all of it. Like it demanded everything we had. Like it was all consuming on every level. Was just very early on, I got a taste of the appetite that people in this country had for this. You know, it was just the people were like, yeah, we want to play a part. We want to play more of a part in shaping politics. We want politics in this country to be shaped more by the shared values of, you know, people who care about well-being and who care about community and who care about the planet. And so that appetite was so, it was so evident, and the way that people responded to what we were doing really early on gave me a sense that there was a real, people wanted it. And so that very quickly becomes your why, right? It's like there's all these people saying, yes, I want to be part of making a better country. So yeah, then that becomes your why really quickly.
I love that. And just building on that, I guess that was one of the things that really attracted me to ActionStation as well. Was prior to ActionStation, I had done a lot of work in fundraising agencies, working on behalf of a lot of really large NGOs. And one of the, and then in my when I wasn't doing fundraising, I was working in events, bringing people together for parties, basically, and festivals. And I remember my sense of frustration with the charity sector was that it was essentially fundraising from a large group of people so that a small group of paid professionals can go out and change the world. And I was looking at, you know, festivals, which I see as like this sort of bringing together of huge people power and energy. Like it's there for pure joy and fun, which I also think is important. But, you know, I was just thinking, like, what if we applied that same sort of people power to, you know, things that, to changing the world, changing Aotearoa for the better. And so one of the things that really attracted me to wanting to be involved with ActionStation was this idea that we use the power of the internet to enable people to combine their skills, their time, their talent, their energy, their ideas, their creativity, their voice, and their putia to create the change that they want to see. So it's more than just sort of treating people as an ATM, and instead treating people as folks with brilliant skills to, you know, that if we combine those with other people with brilliant skills and we all sort of have this vision of where we want to go, then actually we can bring that vision to life. Which I think is, yeah, and I think we've stayed true to that as well, which is really wonderful. so about open, because I think that's a really big part of the ActionStation story, and I'm not sure it's a story that we tell all that often to ActionStation members. And so what role do you think being connected to open played in the success of ActionStation, or in the development of ActionStation's story?
Well, I would just say, just as the sort of foundational, it would not be here because it's so hard in this country to raise money for something political that, you know, it doesn't matter if it doesn't have an affiliation. You know, the big money that you need to get something, you know, to scale is just that there's only a few people with those pockets. All the traditional kind of you know, charities and things won't touch it. So it required really heavy hitting fundraising, and I didn't have those skills. And I also didn't have the self-confidence about this idea, because before ActionStation was ActionStation, it was just a crazy idea in my head. And you know, so I actually had to have a huge amount of self-belief, which was kind of lacking because it just wasn't my trade. You know, I'd sort of my background was in design and communication and maybe a bit of social enterprise. I dabbled, but I wasn't deep in any of this. I wasn't even deep in the Green Party. I just basically told them that they need more people like me to vote for them, and I know how to do it. So I wasn't deep in any knowledge. I just had a vision, really. And so I think, you know, Ben saw that vision. He knew that there was he knew the potential existed, and I think he also got this sort of he did a barometer test for New Zealand. I think he really felt like it could take hold here. It could root here really deeply, because we have, as part of our sort of national story on some level, fairness. You know, it kind of goes through waves when it's expressed more or less, but you know, that's part of our founding story, and we've had these big moments in our history. And so it was about kind of crafting a narrative that really was going to you know, touch that place in people. So yeah, it wouldn't have happened without him, because he was beside me while I was doing some very big pitches. He made me, you know, pitch to him again and again, and I was nervous and pretty pathetic, actually. So he was sort of, you know, he really helped tune me, and he was just this amazing sense of support. So Ben as a person was, you know, his investment in ActionStation was sort of, you know, it was so heartfelt. It was so right there. Like, he came and stayed in my house, and you know, was that level of pastoral care. And that, you know, that was sort of before I think he'd really activated Open. So he, but he was busy, you know, connecting me with Get Up, and you know, there were times, and once again, I would not have been able to. We wouldn't have the brand we have without Get Up. We wouldn't have, and I mean, you know, some of those things that you get when you collaborate, you lose some aspects of your own kind of, you know. We have you know, I really wanted to represent Aotearoa culture, and it was kind of hard when I was standing in Sydney beside their designer, going, well, no, you know, we do need to have this koru element. It's really important to me. This means so much, or you know, so he wasn't impressed, but too bad. You know, like that's you know. So, you know, like Get Up invested in ActionStation with time, and you know, they're so busy, because you know, the team at ActionStation know it's like, you don't have spare capacity. If you're contributing something to another organization, it's on top of what you're doing. So everything I know that they were giving me was on top of what they were already doing, which makes it all the more of a gift, really, to us that our sister in Australia really gave us the lift. And there were a couple of times when that was dangerous, you know, like there were huge risks with that, because I was sort of relying on some technology that they'd offered, and the technology was sort of falling over and they didn't have the capacity. And I was just this poor smelly cousin over the ditch who, you know, couldn't quite get to the top of their email list. And so that caused, you know, stress and problems. And but I think that it's it's testament to all the people that were sort of coming in who lifted it and went, right, we've got to take this to a new place, and invested, you know, here our people invested time and you know, and Marianne sort of, oh, she's amazing. So she yeah, there'll be more of Marianne soon, but Open, in terms of Open, they've been profound at that early ignition stage. Over to you, Marianne.
I was just going to ask one quick question, which is, wasn't ActionStation also like one of the first Pledge Me campaigns? Is that right?
Yes, the first that got and funded in, like, you know, record time. So yeah, we were one of their little poster stories for a while.
So that, if I'm right in remembering, that was to crowdfund your, like, I think it was originally, the idea was going to be 3 months of your time, your like, to pay for your life costs so that you could spend time getting ActionStation off the ground. But how long did it actually end up being?
So 24 months.
Yeah, and I think it's important to name that kind of stuff, isn't it? Because, like, getting organizations like this off the ground requires sweat equity. It requires, like, dedication, time, and so much work. And you gave so much of yourself in those 24 months and after that as well. And I just really wanted, like, one of the reasons I wanted to organize the session was so that we could, like, really honor that, because it's true that ActionStation would not be the vehicle for change that it is today without your energy, your time, and your effort. So I just wanted to name that and thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And then I shall just pass some of that shared glow and glory onto my husband and my daughter, because they you know, there was, well, she wasn't here originally, but then she came pretty much as soon as Marianne sort of took over the baton. I had a baby, and so there was just a lot going on in our family, and, you know, my husband had carried a lot personally while I was trying to do that. So yeah, Francis, and, you know, I think there might have been some stress hormones in the womb, possibly.
Thank you, Francis, for learning us, Megan.
Thank you.
Marianne, how did Open help you in your first couple of years of working with ActionStation?
I mean, I think I'm so grateful to you for asking this question, because the contribution of the Open Network to the existence of ActionStation is really, like, can't be overstated. It cannot be overstated. Not only would it have not existed in that first iteration, there's no way I would have survived that first year. Just absolutely no way I would have survived that first year without them. I wouldn't have survived it without Megan, but I wouldn't have survived it without the Open Network. And that ranged from, you know, their tech advisors walking me through step by step which tech platform to use and what the pros and cons were and what other organizations are finding around the world. It involved, like, literally teaching me how to write a campaign email based on everything they had learned, like every bit of data that every founding member had absorbed over the millions and millions and millions of emails they'd written. They shared it all with us. There was no trade secrets, right? They just literally said, this is everything we know about how to write an email that people will feel engaged by and respond to. And then, as I said, there was this particularly close relationship I had with Siobhan and Deepa. So Siobhan at Uplift and Deepa at Jatka, where we would just get on the phone or on Zoom and talk through everything that is really, really hard about starting up this kind of organization. And that ranges from, as Megan said, like, I'm going to have to put, you know, the team's salaries on my credit card this month. Like, am I insane? Like, you know, should I be doing this? Through to, policies. Like we somehow in the middle of, you know, working till 11 o'clock every night on campaigns, we've got to set up actual policies. And if we don't have policies, you know, we'll get in trouble at some point. We don't. So we just swap policies. Like Siobhan would send me the Irish one and I would just go, oh, well, New Zealand can't be that different from Ireland. Like we'll just take out the words. And so it was, you know, it was amazing. And they, and I think it's wonderful and important to honour that. And that continued through, I know, the first time I ever went to an open gathering was with Laura, and we went together. And I'd never been to anything like it before. I'd never been to a gathering of organisations. And I'd spent a lot of time in international networks. You know, I've participated in Amnesty and Oxfam and a whole lot of organisations that have global networks. But this was different because this was a network where people were completely honest with each other. Like I remember one of the sessions we had at that first global gathering that we went to in the UK, the session was like, what is the worst mistake you've ever made? Like, what is the worst mistake you've ever made? And I thought we'd made some terrible mistakes in our first year until the people from the UK like told this terrible, terrible, terrible story about repeatedly sending out an automated email with a dead MP's name in it, and like realizing this terrible thing they'd done and then trying to fix it, but not quite fixing it properly. And in the apology, like getting it wrong again. And so I was like, oh, well, you know, we haven't made any mistakes that bad. And then the people from Australia told this story about putting the wrong phone number up at an event that had like 200,000 people at it, saying text this number, and the number was wrong. So that kind of just, you know, if you're messing up, you're in really good company. I found that to be really reassuring. Yeah. And then for me, then Open Network just continued to get more and more interesting as like a more diverse range of countries and groups and people came into that network, bringing like an increasingly diverse kind of range of ways of thinking about what we were doing. But yeah, I really thank you, Laura, for asking that, because I think if you appreciate what ActionStation is doing in our country right now, there's a real debt to organisations around the world who are doing the same thing, who just generously said, we'll give you everything we know and we'll cheer you on and we'll take your phone calls late at night and we'll, yeah, so totally important.
Absolutely pivotal for that. And I think there's been a couple of times as well, like I love the open summits and the opportunity to gather with people who have the same job as us, because actually our job is quite weird. It's like a very odd thing that we do. And so digital campaigning together with other digital campaigners and organisers from around the world who are really committed to activating people power for progressive change is just a wonderful thing in and of itself. But also we do secondments to each other's organisations. And so ActionStation staff have gone over to South Africa and Australia and spent time with them. I know that you've been overseas to spend time with some of our open sister organisations, Marianne. And then in the 2017 election, we had Rainier, a campaigner from Get Up in Australia, join us for 4 weeks ahead of the election. And she was just the fastest email writer I've ever met. And she would just, and it was at a time we really needed that additional capacity. Like I think at the time ActionStation staff was just, we were just 4 in our team at that point. And so she what is it? She added 20, I don't actually know how to do percentages. She added to our people power, which was just wonderful. And so they've been so helpful in so many ways. My next question was about, are there any particular campaigns or moments or decisions that you have been really proud of in ActionStation's history? And can you tell us a little bit about them? Maybe I'll start with you, Megan.
Kia ora. Well, so all the moments that I'm really most proud of are when I've left. And you know, handed it well on down the line. But I think that the abuse and state care work was just the most profound that I've seen. I mean, I think that the stories are just, it's just so dark. And it's just so grim and so brutal and so clearly racist, and it's this terrible, lingering colonist kind of. There's no words that I have to describe just how ashamed I am of that. and that those stories got to come into the light, and what the staff must have handled throughout. So I think I remember, Laura, you talking about that petition handover and then just weeping in your car because of what you'd been exposed to. So none, like, there's a there's a real joyful optimism that I have, but sometimes in order to arrive there, you have to just deeply feel. And so this work at times is just so heavy, and that you employ people to go and do such heavy work, it's like it's mining, it's the equivalent of going into the darkest parts of our culture and our history and dredging it all up and packaging it in a way that can touch some hearts. It's like, whew, I'm so proud of how that was handled, how it was messaged, how it was received. I'm lucky enough to sort of work with a bunch of organizations all over the country, lots of iwi, Ministry of Education, and Ministry of Justice. I hear I actually feel the ripples from that. I feel the ripples. I literally, they come into the work that is being done in the room when I'm drawing. It's just quite profound to, be at the Hapaitia Justice Summit and have the ripples of the work that ActionStation does hit me in a completely different way. It just, like, I can't, the amount of gratitude that I have for, especially for the hardest moments, because, I'm lucky enough to have, I probably don't even know what the hardest moments are that the team have carried and been through. I know that they've been heavy and hard and difficult, but I just, to know that's the work that you guys are doing, just totally blows me away. And I never had to do any of that heavy lifting. So I have profound gratitude, I have amazement, I have just the deepest heartfelt love for the staff and everyone who has touched those types of campaigns, because they're immense. And I'm sorry that that's part of your job, but thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Marianne?
Yeah, I have a lot, and I'm not going to give you just one. I'm going to give you 4, and I could go on all night. I think the best decision I made in my entire time at ActionStation is unquestionably when I got a message from someone called Laura O'Connell Rapira, and Laura O'Connell Rapira saying we should meet for coffee, and we met for coffee in Auckland, and she said you should hire me, and I said okay, and I think every single ActionStation member today would agree that that is the very best decision I made, and I am so grateful that you put your hand up, Laura, at that really early stage. That was right at the very beginning. So even though, like, I was technically there before Laura, but it was one of the very first things that happened in my role was that Laura showed up and said, I'm going to join you. And we got to spend 4 years together. And it was, even if we had made zero useful benefit to the country, like, that was a joy. So, I mean, it did, and clearly that legacy continues on with Laura's amazing leadership, but it was an absolute joy, and it's been a huge joy in my life to have that personal relationship. In terms of the campaigns, I will never forget the day that we handed over the abuse and state care petition, and a man approached me and he said, because what happened was they had an open mic and people could, so firstly there were some people who had pre-committed to telling their stories, and then they had the mic open and they said to people, you may come and tell your story if you want to and if you need to. And there was a man who came and stood next to me because I was standing there with the box that had all the printed signatures and a sign that said how many people had signed the petition. And he said to me, I'm going to go there and I'm going to tell my story for the first time ever in my life. And I'm 57 years old and I'm scared and I need that sign. Because if I can stand there with that sign, I will know all those people are standing with me. And I can't believe that many people signed this petition and care about this. And it was because I thought the numbers were small, and I'd been so disappointed in the small numbers of people in our country who had been motivated to participate in that campaign. And I'd been really sort of just really sad about that. I was like, how can this not be the fastest growing thing we've ever done? Like, how can every single person in this country not be signing this? But to him, it was more people than he had ever imagined would care about him. So that was a really big moment for me. And then the other two things that I want to share, because they're hopefully encouragements to you now because of what we're currently campaigning on again, is that in 2015 we campaigned to get a lift in the base benefit level, and it seemed unwinnable at the time. Honestly, we had a national government. I couldn't see any reason why it would be politically kind of smart for them to commit to lifting the base benefit level. But we had two Māori MPs in that parliament, and they were committed to getting that across the line. And what they needed was every single expert and advocate across the child poverty space to be saying the same thing. And they needed a show from ordinary people that there was public support for it. And that was what we were able to deliver them. And it was really Marama Fox, inside Parliament, who probably got that across the line, but we were able to deliver her specifically the things that she said she needed. And I know that ActionStation members are working so hard to get reform of our welfare system now. And so I just want to remind you that we've done it before. It's hard work. But when things line up and we have some really great people in Parliament again who care about this, it is possible for that to happen. And then the final one, which is much more personal, is just the People's Mental Health Report. As somebody with personal experience of mental illness, I was really proud to work on that and to gather all those stories up. It was hard. It took probably a personal toll, but it made a difference. It's, we're far enough down the track now that I'm frustrated by the slow implementation of the outcomes of the big inquiry. But that inquiry happened because of the ActionStation members who shared their stories with us. So yeah, those are some of my proud moments.
Can you talk a little bit more about that campaign, Marianne? Just because I think it has been one of our greatest successes in the history of ActionStation, and I think that is in large part because of the work that you did. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about some of the things that you thought worked in that campaign, and like the ingredients that made it a success, I guess.
The mental health campaign. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it was very much a team effort, because I think that what I was able to contribute, and something that I really understood from my background as a human rights researcher and advocate, was the power of research, and particularly the power of qualitative research. So the power of gathering people's stories, and gathering people's stories at a scale where you can conduct an analysis which starts to paint a really robust sort of evidence base for what's actually happening. So that was a piece that I really understood, and that I'd seen particularly in my human rights work, that, working in the Gaza Strip or working in Afghanistan, if you can't get people to move on something, you go out and you gather 500 stories on violence against women, and you do really, really robust analysis of it, and you put it in front of people in a way that anybody who tries to argue with it basically looks like a complete ass. You know, it really, like, it becomes very difficult to argue with. But the success wasn't just down to that. I think the other part, which I think, Laura, you played a much bigger role in and other people did, was the alliance building. And that was really important. Well, we all were part of that, but it was like in that process of story gathering, we all invested a lot of time building relationships with people who were whose lives were really affected by what was happening in terms of our mental health system. So we spent a lot of time listening to and talking with groups of people who represented people with lived experience of mental distress and ill health, or we spent time talking to groups that represented people who worked in the mental health services. So we had a really, really important alliance, I thought, with the nurses, particularly with mental health nurses, but specifically with the Nurses Union, but more generally with the Public Service Association and with all the people who worked, because what was really important to us at ActionStation was to realise that people were being harmed by the severe sort of under-resourcing of our mental health services. People who needed those services were being harmed, but the people who were trying to deliver those services in a severely under-resourced state were also being harmed. And so it was really important that the campaign didn't appear to only, or didn't appear to and didn't in fact engage only one part of that community of people. So I think that alliance building was really important. Don't you agree? Would you agree with that, Laura? I think that at the end, those relationships and the fact that by the time our report came out, there probably wasn't a group in New Zealand who cared about mental health who we hadn't talked to about, you know, what they thought should be in the recommendations. And yeah,
I absolutely agree. I think one of the things I've really appreciated about ActionStation is collaboration has been built into the DNA from the very beginning, and I think that has our biggest impact has come when we've collaborated well, because even the example you gave from 2015 of campaigning for increasing core benefit levels, that also required alliance building. I remember there were a lot of conversations in the lead up to that campaign to actually decide together with Child Poverty Action Group and NZCCSS and UNICEF and a few others about what is our ask going to be. And so I think that's the sort of behind the scenes stuff that people don't always get to see. The things that happen in the engine room when we're doing these campaigns is that you may see the rally or the protest or the report launch, but not necessarily all of the relationship building conversations that are happening along the way in order for us to actually put forward this united front. And that actually takes quite a lot of work. And so that
wasn't inevitable, was it, Laura? Like, I don't know if you were with me. I don't think you were, actually. I think it was before, but I went, and this is no disrespect to the person who gave me this advice, because he is awesome and Laura's about to go and work with him. But I went to sit with one of the people who was involved in launching Get Up, and I said, okay, what are the top 3 things you would tell me? And one of them was like, don't try and collaborate. Like, his advice was like, do not try and collaborate because it will slow you down. To win these kinds of moments, you've got to be able to move really fast. So you have to, like, basically I was told, you've got to be willing to piss a whole lot of other people who've been working on these issues for years, piss them off, because your ask isn't the thing that they would have asked for, but because what you know is the ask that will mobilize the people. Like, it's got to be this, you know, this right mix of evidence-based, but actually like the right match for what people are going to sign up to. And I just was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that, because I have, you know, decades working in the social and human rights sector, and New Zealand's small, and I will be pissing off my friends and colleagues, not like some stranger who's been working for years on human rights issues. Like, they're my people. So we made a choice really early on to do a thing that wasn't in the open model, which was to say we won't go out and campaign on something when other people have been in the trenches working on it for years, until we've established a relationship with them and identified that what ActionStation does can add value to what they're doing. And I'm sure we got that wrong at points and people didn't think we did that well, but we always tried, right? We always came from the view that that was how we wanted to operate in the world. Yeah.
I definitely think it's a big point of difference with us and other open networks. And the other point of difference that I would say is that participatory research element. I would say that that the People's Mental Health Report was the biggest version of us doing that at scale, and since then that has been a model that we have carried through, and Madeline, who's on this call, has done a lot of surveys and things to collect the voices of, to gather the voices of people with lived experience of the issues that we're trying to change, and then to amplify those voices through the media, through reports, through discussion papers, and so on and so forth. And that has really proven to be an effective way for us to push for change. And it starts with listening, and then it's about amplifying people, lived experience experts. And some of my proudest moments are, you know, amplifying the voices of Māori and Pacifica people to say, actually, we don't want police to be armed in this country because that makes us really scared for our whānau. Also, you know, gathering the voices of 900 Māori for their perspectives on the justice system and what needs to change in the justice system. And that's certainly an element that I hope stays with ActionStation and the work that we do going forward, because I think stories are really powerful, and they're also really, like, it's one of the things that connects us to Te Ao Māori as well, because of course Te Ao Māori is grounded in stories and it's an oral culture, and so it's one of the tactics that I think is a bit more indigenous in its way of doing things in a sector that is quite heavily dominated by Pākehā thinking and Western thinking. And so I really love that research story participatory element of things.
It's really lovely to hear you say that, because I realized that was, like, really that was my background, right? My background was in participatory research as a tool for advocacy, and I hadn't really, I like hearing that and thinking that that's become, combined with your understanding of that, Laura, like together that's become part of what makes us special, what makes ActionStation special. Yeah, that's nice.
Megan.
No, it's gone now, but I was just I want to ask you a question about I think I'm noticing just this incredible pace of change, and the wonderful thing about collaboration is it speeds up that change. The difficult thing is the narrative around owning the change, you know. So I know that ActionStation has played these beautiful kind of turnkey kind of, like, just being able to be you know, because we've facilitated or enabled these moments or these opportunities, we have done something wonderful. But then there's this huge historical, but also, you know, multifaceted kind of sectors that we engage, you know, who are often they're the heavy lifters. They do lots of the research, and in some ways we are facilitating those moments. Do you have sort of insights around how to approach and think about that?
You mean the storytelling around the collaborations, or the information?
Yeah, the storytelling around the collaboration, so that it's true to the whole system.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that people are actually really hungry for stories of collaboration. I remember in the early days of ActionStation, sometimes we'd get, and still today, we'll sometimes get emails from people being like, I saw so-and-so, a different organization, talking about this too, make sure that you're talking to them. And so I think people are really looking for opportunities to contribute to collective impact, to people who are, you know, talking with one another in order to achieve the change that they want to see. But yeah, at ActionStation, we make a real effort actually to name all of the community partners that we work with. And so every year in our annual report, we have the list of all of the people that we've worked with. We always make a point to name the community organizations and the individuals as well that we work alongside in the various campaigns that we run, because social change, at least at the scale that we dream it, requires everyone. It requires much more than one organization. And I think it's interesting you mentioned that story about the advice from GetUp, because I would say that GetUp, having seen the success of ActionStation collaborating, have actually changed their model to be much more collaborative. And I sort of love that, because we talked at the beginning of this call about how ActionStation wouldn't be here without Open. And now I would say that it's moved into this reciprocal relationship in which Open wouldn't continue to grow into its power if it wasn't for ActionStation and the sort of innovations that we've been able to make on the model here. And I think that's really quite wonderful.
What are your insights, Laura, on, you know, on like obviously storytelling has this beautiful kind of resonance with our Indigenous population, but what's the opportunity that you see next for us in terms of how we do ActionStation in a much more Indigenous kind of with an Indigenous wisdom, or you know, and even, you know, we may not have an Indigenous person to lead us. What would you say is how would we do that, you know, authentically?
So the way that we often talk about ActionStation is grounded in the Mātiki Mai model. So Mātiki Mai was a participatory nationwide process led by Moana Jackson and Professor Margaret Mutu, where they travelled around the country to hold 252 hui, where 10,000 Māori participated in what is our vision for 2040. And that vision is essentially that we transform the constitution, and a constitution is basically the set of rules and principles and values that we all agree to be governed by or abide by. So basically changing the rules of everything is what constitutional transformation says. And it says that when we change those rules, Māori must make decisions by and for Māori. And it talks about how there is the rangatira sphere, in which Māori make decisions for Māori. There is the kāwanatanga sphere, which is the crown, the government, and then there's the relational sphere, the space in between. And they provide 6 different models for what a transformed constitution could look like. But in every single one of them, Māori make decisions for Māori. And so I'm very clear, I think, that ActionStation is not an organisation that operates in the rangatira sphere. So even though I'm Māori and I am the director of ActionStation at the moment, we are here to be in relationship to those in the rangatira sphere and put pressure on the kāwanatanga sphere to decolonise, so that the re-indigenisation work can actually just happen without so much noise and mess and racistness in the way. And so I very much see ActionStation's positionality in that ecosystem of change, of being like, how do we make this place less racist and less awful, so that Māori can actually bring these aspirations and this beautiful vision of a Māori vision of the future to life. And I think that I've had a lot of feedback since I've let ActionStation members know that I will be moving on, that one of the things they've really appreciated is sort of this focus on decolonisation that has come about over the past couple of years as well. I am really conscious of the time, so I'm just going to ask for I'm trying to think about I think maybe the question we'll end on is what you hope for what ActionStation can achieve in the future. And maybe, yeah, are either of you ready to answer that question?
I'm almost certain that Megan will be more ready than me. She's so much better at imagining the future. I'm really good at somebody else imagines the future and then tells me, how do we get there? And I can go, I can give you a plan to get there. That's always been my job in this team. It's like, you two have the vision. I'm like, I will figure out how to get there. Anyway.
Well, I guess the place where I have my attention is the place that in some ways I feel that New Zealand is most vulnerable. And I think that we saw that I think many of the things that we've been paying attention to are really, you know, coming away. I'm pretty excited about the day after the TV awards, when Mahingarangi Forbes won the best presenter, and 1,000 people in this swanky Auckland kind of environment got up and did the haka for her. And then the next morning I turned on the telly, breakfast TV, and there were 3 Māori women. One was doing the weather, 2 were doing interviews, and it was just like, I feel like there are some amazing shifts that are happening, but the place I feel that New Zealand is most vulnerable is in our in the weird connection between our politics, our elections, and our social media and activity. So I feel that we are very vulnerable to just influence. And I think that New Zealand has to get, you know, we have, I think, this beautiful window of opportunity to champion some pretty amazing things around different ways of imagining that we pulling out any sort of money around our politics and our elections, and that includes, you know, fed farmers, you know, putting a bob each way, like just no money, just citizens. You know, we'll fund the taxpayers will fund the elections, and then we find some way as ActionStation to either raise awareness or help our people understand how vulnerable they are, because it's almost like we actually, I think, in our whānau of ActionStation members probably have some people who are very vulnerable to conspiracy theories, who are very vulnerable to just being chucked down a rabbit hole that's paid for by some international influence, for just the mere purposes of destabilizing we're just creating fear so that we are unstable, and therefore we're in a much better place for their, you know, external influence. So that's the place that I am most afraid, and I see the greatest opportunity.
Thank you. I know that's an area that you do quite a lot of research on, Marianne, in your current role at the workshop. Yeah, are there any things that you hope ActionStation will achieve over the next kind of electoral cycle?
I mean, there are like really specific things. Like I absolutely, if I was to, I mean, I could break it down into specific policy changes. I absolutely want to win the changes that need to happen in the welfare system, and I want that to happen now, because the thing that I always think, and I can't quite get my head around how our Prime Minister makes peace with this, is that 3 years is the entire period that a child, you know, who is experiencing the detrimental effects of that child's parent, primarily in many of these situations, their mother, living with unbearable stress. It's a huge impact, and it's like, so you cannot put it off for 3. So I absolutely, there's specific campaigns that I carry very deeply in my heart, and that I love everything the ActionStation is doing, and I have so much personal, I take so much personal delight in watching the care and craft with which the staff, I know that so much of what makes these campaigns powerful are the members, and I mean, obviously that's why I'm in this, but there's also this incredible care and craft that the staff at ActionStation bring to saying, what is the very best way we can do this? Like, how can we honour the energy, the resources, the time, the signatures, the donations that those members are giving? The staff of ActionStation take that and say, what is the most skillful way we can use that to try and achieve this change? And that's something that I just take a lot of delight in watching, because I know I can see it, like, right, I can see the care and craft that goes into that. That's not really the future. I think maybe if I thought it in a big way, my vision would be that the political leadership in this country come to understand that their job is to two things. Firstly, that they are incredibly influential shapers of the public narrative. And so rather than what they currently do, which is sit back and say, we'll wait until the people demand or say that they want this thing, instead, they'll shift to say, we know what's needed, because they do, because the evidence is, you know, available to them. They know exactly what needs to happen in housing. They know what needs to happen in our benefit levels. They know what needs to happen in our justice system. So what I would love is to get to a place where they get enough kind of strength in their, I don't know what the saying is, but like they receive this kind of strength from ActionStation members that reminds them that they don't have to be timid about this, that they can be courageous and they can be leaders, and they can say, we know this is needed. This many people have come and told us, we will stand with you, we will stand behind you if you do this. And then they lead. You know, they actually go out and say, I'm going to sell this with my extraordinary communication skills, which are, you know, let's face it, we have some extraordinarily skilled communicators in our political leadership. I will use that to lead this country towards the policy changes that I know are needed. And what I think ActionStation is doing, and ActionStation members are doing, is that they're creating some kind of momentum that if we just keep throwing all that we've got behind it as members, because now that's what I am. I'm just an ActionStation member like the rest of you. It's just like throw everything I've got behind those moments. We can give those political leaders the boost they need to lead us to make those changes, because, I think they're just being a bit too timid. And I think they need us to remind them that's not their job. Their job is to seize this incredible opportunity they have and actually make the changes that will improve people's lives now, not in 3 years. So that's my vision. And I think between the incredible staff and the membership, I think we're going to do it.
Beautiful. Love that. Great note to end on. Thank you so much for your time and your just everything, especially this late at night as well after a big day. I really appreciate it. Thank you to the staff and Tase for coming along. And and thank you to all the ActionStation members who are watching this on the annual report website. We really appreciate all the energy and time and everything that you give to this wonderful movement that it's been a joy and a privilege to be a part of. I will stop the recording now. Oops, I just stopped my video, not the recording. Lol.